Okay, hello everybody. Oh, no, not a whole big table. You were awesome. I was looking for a small table. I just gotta get her some
There's a round one, but
How about, can we get that wooden one right there for her? And hello everybody on the live stream. We'll be there in a minute.
he wants to play cards.
Well, we're all gonna do our own notes. Yeah. And you're gonna be our general note taker for everybody. Yeah, exactly, that's gonna be the best. Oh, good. Share that table.
How do you do walking backwards?
Oh, I do great.
Who brought the playing cards?
Well, with it, knock the chair with the bucket.
For her.
Right here.
Gonna do some magic tricks?
Yes. Ah, that's why. That's why.
Wait, somebody got balls.
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Okay, hello everybody. Hello everybody. Hello everybody, and welcome. Welcome everybody. For those with the live stream, I'm trying to get the live stream to move to get us all. Interesting. I wonder why the live stream, I wonder if it's static. Well, we're going with this. Hello, everybody. Oh, that's me. That's,
Do it again?
that's my thing. Okay, welcome everybody to Congregation Orami. What's that? Oh, beautiful. Hello, everybody streaming in, and hello, everybody who is in here. This is a very special moment, and we'll say a Torah blessing and Shehachianu in a minute. Our Reform movement, for the first time since the 1980s, is embarking on a new Torah commentary. We have the Plout commentary that was written in the 1980s, or before the 80s, now around the 80s, and we have Torah, a women's commentary by Dr. Eskenazi and Dr. Weiss that we actually studied with them sometime in the last couple of years. And there are other Torah commentaries out there, but it's time for a new translation and a new commentary that speaks to our generation. And the CCAR, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, of which the two of us are members, the Reform Movement's rabbinic organization that has about over 1,800 rabbis, is embarking on this process through the Reform Jewish Press. And they've started translating the Torah, and they invited congregations around the world to be part of a piloting process, but they sent some letters out to a number. And they sent a letter out to us and said, we want your congregation that's known for its seriousness, thoughtfulness, to be part of this. We'll begin together with a blessing for Torah study. It's Baruch Tevitzivanu, but because not everyone knows it, I'm going to give you 3 lines at a time, and we'll say it back. So, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, vitzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. It means, blessed are you, eternal our God, guide of the universe, who makes us holy through holy acts. Torah, section of Torah that we're going to be looking at. That's for another time. This is, what's the Torah commentary? How does it feel? How does it roll from our mouth? Is it speaking in ways? What are we noticing? What stands out? How the whole thing feels. And so we're going to look at the translation, principles of translation first, and then we're going to read through the Hebrew commentary, and then we are going to Then we are going to delve into the commentary, and we're going to ask questions and take notes. Yes?
Well, I was gonna let you finish.
Okay, and thank you. And we'll take you through the process. We don't have enough time to do what we want to do. So we're going to push us through, and if a comment goes in this direction, we're going to say thank you and pull it back this way and not go in that direction. Go ahead.
This, I think, is on target. What specifically was wrong?
That's a great question. We're not going to go there because it's a longer thing. In general, it's just old language. It's time to update it, yes.
Are we using the plot commentary as the starting point?
No, we're going to take you all through that. So let's open up the principles of translation that were on your that we emailed out to those who signed up. I think Kieran and Beth, you have them because Rabbi Lana emailed them, and we want to read these through together. So how should we do this? Take a paragraph around, or? And we have to, because we have people on the live stream, we're going to ask you to speak into the mic. To speak into the mic, you need to hold it up to your mouth. If it's over here or over here, it doesn't work. So just right like there. Yes.
Okay. So we'll just read together, paragraph. So I'm starting at the bottom of the page where it says this translation will be enriched by the many English translations that have preceded this one and by the insights of traditional Jewish commentators and commentary scholarship. It will have scholarly integrity, although its primary audience is not the community of scholars.
Will be created with laity and clergy in mind for their use in worship, group and personal study, and life cycle events.
Will aim to be an equivalent of the Hebrew text, translating not word for word, but sense for sense, idea for idea. The Hebrew text will be rendered in English in full recognition of the ways in which the two languages differ in sound, syntax, rhythm, breadth, and depth of vocabulary, and structure, and in the layered meaning of words and idioms that are unique to the cultures in which the languages have grown.
Will aim to capture the flavor and texture of biblical Hebrew. At the same time, we strive for a translation that sings when read aloud in English, whenever possible, and brings out the beauty of the original. Careful attention will be paid to English style, sound and cadence, diction, and register, as well as stylistic features of biblical Hebrew, including semantic and linguistic patterns, poetic qualities such as alliteration, assonance, consonance, rhythm, rhyme, wordplay/pun, multiple levels of meaning, allusion, euphemism, parallelism, and chiasmus. Thank you. Creative English style will reflect notable features of Hebrew. For example, if there is wordplay or sound patterning in the Hebrew, there will often be comparable use of language in the English.
Will aim to be a source of spiritual inspiration, demonstrating the beauty and complexity of the Torah and its values in our lives.
We'll aim to make the text come alive for readers and students, which may entail the use of creative or challenging language. We hope that new translations of familiar words and expressions will draw attention to them, prompting reflection on their meaning.
We'll aim for clarity in conveying meaning, except in cases where it seems that the Hebrew text is intentionally ambiguous. Sometimes a translation will reflect difficulties or ambiguities in the original without trying to smooth them out and make them invisible.
Will incorporate Hebrew words within the English text. There are several reasons for this. To make clear to readers that the text was composed in another language, to emphasize the value of the Hebrew language, to teach some significant words, to help readers recognize in a new context words that may already be familiar to them, to demonstrate linguistic relationships, wordplay, and leitmotifs, and give non-Hebrew readers and speakers a sense of the sound and texture of the Hebrew language.
We'll use the gender accurate as directed from gender sense my eyes aren't focusing. As distinct from gender sensitive methodology developed for the revision of the Bamber Torah. That is, a translation will use male or female singular pronouns when the next is clearly referring to a man or a woman, but when no specific gender is intended, they, them, their will often be used in the default pronouns. Male pronouns for God will not be used, though the translation will convey specifically male theological imagery when it appears in the text.
Will reflect inconvenient truths about the biblical period and its literature, such as slavery, sexism, hostile relations with non-Israelites, the pervasiveness of violence, and anthropomorphic images of God, as well as God's rage and violence towards humanity, without apologetic attempts to clean up or tone down the language.
Will, however, make language choices with sensitivity to the diverse community for which we are translating. For example, a word might be translated as barren or as childless. A phrase might be translated as male and female slaves, or enslaved persons, male and female. A word might be translated as prostitute, whore, promiscuous woman, courtesan, harlot, or sex worker. A word describing two men having sex might be translated as abomination, repugnant, abhorrent act, or taboo. Regarding all these choices, and others as well, the translation will be faithful to the Hebrew, but will be presented in a way that is inclusive and respectful as possible. Sometimes word choice depends on context. For example, there may be distinctions between the narrative voice and the voices of characters in dialogue who do not necessarily use inclusive, respectful language.
We'll view Torah with reverence and will also be attuned to comic elements in the text.
This is Michelle Waters, a friend of Rabbi Lana's. A few technical notes.
The text is divided into shorter lines, units of thought, in order to bring out the rhythm, highlight the structure, aid in reading aloud, and help the reader to focus on each part of the verse. The goal is a more careful, deliberate, and appreciative experience of reading. Brackets are used within the body of the text for the following purposes: to indicate the English translation of certain Hebrew words, to indicate the Hebrew translation of certain English words, to give a transliteration of certain Hebrew words. In a few cases, an emendation of MT appears in brackets. Hebrew place names appears in italics. The detailed notes that accompany the text explain translation choices, point out distinctive features of the text, cite sources, both traditional and contemporary, and, in some cases, provide commentary on the meaning of the text.
Beautiful. So much there, and we will come back at another point and think about what those principles have to say. As Rabbi Lana passes out the Torah commentary, the New Translation Torah Commentary, we're looking at Genesis chapter 34. Many of you know it as the story of the rape of Dinah. I want you to take that title and put it out of your head, because we're now going to read it. And what's the drash on this? What's the plain meaning? What's the drash on this? What's the plain meaning on this? We're going to talk about the the text and the commentary and see how that plays out. Live control, please fix your screen again. Yes?
Just a question regarding this process. Are we going to get this in advance or?
No, you won't. No, they don't want that. They want you to experience it and reflect upon it.
So we can't use any other resources?
The job is not to compare it to other resources now. It's to see this piloting section is about how this feels when we sit with it now without any preconceived notions, without comparing it to anything else. That's why we're not looking at this week's parashah, Torah portion that you might have seen. There may be other piloting experiences where we do just that. Compare commentaries to commentaries, compare language and ideas to language and ideas. That's not the goal for today. That's a great goal. It's not today's goal.
So are other synagogues doing this same?
Everybody who is doing this is doing the same thing. And we have been told that we are not to share these. We will collect the commentaries when we're done. We're not to publish them online. And I think we're not even allowed to share them by email, but I have to check that out for people who are doing it live stream. Well, it's you get it out, and then people can start making all their comments. This is good, this isn't good, and this is part of the process. So let's turn to page 3 in the Torah commentary. And I am going to read the English all the way through. I'm not going to stop for questions. We're not going to stop to elucidate a word or its meaning. I want you to hear the whole thing. If something interests you, don't go too deep. Make a line, circle it, underline it, star it, and just keep going. Okay? We're trying to get a sense of how this feels. Ready? And the reason we're not switching off is they told us one person should read it all the way through. Okay? Here we go. Page 3. Out and about went Dinah. The daughter of Leah had I'm going to start again. Out and about went Dinah, the daughter that Leah had borne to Yaakov, to see the daughters of the land. Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivi, chieftain of the land, saw her and took her, lay with her, and debased her. With all his being he cleaved to Dinah, daughter of Yaakov. He loved the young woman, and with kind words sought to win the young woman over. Then Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Take this girl for me as a wife." Now Yaakov heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah. His sons were with his livestock in the field, and Yaakov kept silent and stayed silent till they came home. Hamor, father of Shechem, went out to Yaakov to speak with him. Yaakov's sons came home from the field. When they heard, the men were grieved and enraged, for he had committed a vile act against Israel by lying with Yaakov's daughter, a deed that must not be done. Hamor spoke with them, saying, "My son Shechem longs with all his being for your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife, and make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. Settle down with us, and the land will be at your disposal. Settle down, feel free to move about in it, and hold property here." Then Shechem said to her father and her brothers, "Let me find favor with you, and whatever you ask of me, I will give." Demand much of me in bride wealth. I'm on page 5. Demand much of me in bride wealth and a bountiful betrothal gift, and I will give whatever you ask. Just give me the young woman as a wife. Yaakov's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, speaking thus because he had defiled their sister Dinah. They said to them, "We cannot do this thing, giving our sister to a man who has a foreskin, since that is a disgrace for us. Only on this condition will we give you our consent. If you become like us, having every male of yours circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you, and will take your daughters for ourselves, and we will settle among you and become one people." Settle down among you and become one people. "But if you do not heed us and become circumcised, then we will take our daughter and go." Their words were agreeable to Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, And the young man did not tarry in carrying out the act, for he desired Yaakov's daughter. Now he was esteemed above all others in his clan. Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city, and spoke to the men of their city, saying, "These people are at peace with us, so let them settle down in the land and be free to move about in it, for the land is spacious enough for them. As for their daughters, we can take them for ourselves as wives, and we can give our daughters to them. But only on this condition will the men give us their consent to settle down among us and become one people. Every male of ours must be circumcised, as they are circumcised." I'm on page 7. "As for their livestock, their stock of possessions, and all their beasts, won't they become ours? Let us simply give them our consent, so they may settle down among us." All who would go out the gate of their city heeded Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who would go out the gate of their city. And this is what happened. On the third day, when they were in pain, 2 of Yaakov's sons, Dinah's brothers, Shimon and Levi, took each of them his sword, and fell unopposed upon the unsuspecting city, and slew every male. As for Hamor and his son Shechem, they slew them with the devouring mouth of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went on. When Yaakov's other sons came upon the bodies of the dead, they pillaged the city, for their sister had been defiled. Their flocks and their herds and their donkeys, whatever was in the city and whatever was in the field, they took, along with all their wealth. All their children and their women they took captive, for they pillaged everything in the houses. Then Yaakov said to Shimon and Levi, "You have brought disaster on me, giving me a stench among those who live in the land, the Canaanite and the Perizi. And I am few in number, so if they join forces and attack me, I will be destroyed, I and my household." But they said, "Must our sister be used like a whore?" End. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week. Let's do this. Let's now make our way back through. Now, first look at page 8. Page 8 and following are commentary. And the way they work is if you see a number or a dot and the bold, that's a quote from the English text, and then everything below it is commentary. So you see 1, that's from verse 1, "Out and about went Dinah," okay, which is the opening line, and the English below that is the commentary. So let's actually look at that commentary. Okay, ready? "Out and about went Dinah." The Hebrew verb used by the narrator implies criticism of Dinah's behavior. Sarna notes that in the biblical context, the word yatzah, to go out, can connote kodesh or promiscuous conduct. Freimer Kensky discusses the danger posed by girls in patriarchal societies going out unchaperoned beyond the confines of the home. Not only are they vulnerable to attack, but also if harm comes to them, they dishonor their family and reflect poorly on the father's ability to control the women of his household. In biblical and ancient Near East societies, girls were not confined to the home. They might go out, for instance, to draw water. But one who left the house without a specific chore was viewed with suspicion and condemnation. The present translation gives prominence to the verb, emphasizing the idea of being, quote, out, end quote, in order to suggest that the narrator views Dinah's conduct as unconventional and potentially hazardous. In her act of going out, Dinah departs from the norms and expectations of her time. The rhyming phrase, out and about, reflects the presence of a Hebrew rhyme in the same verse, lirot bivnot. Lirot bivnot. Okay, so now let's go back to the English. Page 3. Yes. Yeah.
And I don't want to sidetrack. It just seems like this is very prepared, so it's been in the works for a while, but additional letter or guidance was provided in terms of how to kind of place the current situation within the context of this chapter?
That is a great question. And I probably should have also opened this with a trigger warning that we're going to be talking about relations both between Arabs and Jews and between Israelites or between Shechem and Hamor. They weren't Arabs. Canaanites? And the Hebrews. This was chosen a while back, and no, there wasn't anything additional to contextualize it. So I would encourage us to decontextualize it, forget about out there, and stay right in here, which actually might be a nice Sukkot Shalom, a nice shelter of peace as we go forward. Yes?
The fact is that Dina's voice is nowhere in this. Is there a way in our process to highlight that? It's so obvious that you just don't do that.
So Dawn is going to take notes, and now you just start taking notes, okay? So what you see is what the text seems to say. And so the question will be, does the commentary address that? And let's put a pin in that and continue. Beautiful question.
I think it really sort of helps us to understand that what we're doing is really not about the text. Like, it's not about the story. It's about the translation. And this is a great example of that, because the fact that Dina's voice is not heard even once in the story, that's the story. That's how the story is told. And where we can struggle with it for sure, but there's nothing for us to do about it. And then we are really looking at the new translation of the English, but not with the context. I think it's a good example to sort of emphasize that.
And what a great challenge for a Torah study community, a Bible study community, to be told, that's a great question. Next, and move on, because we want to. We are dying to get into it. I look forward to studying this when we can go into those questions. Yes?
So much do I want to like. What is, I know you said
We have to use mics. Hang on. We have to give mics. So we're going to do something very dangerous. We're going to give you a mic.
Okay.
When we give you a mic, I have the ability here to mute you. So we have just about another 45 minutes, so keep the comments short. And
really quickly, it just seems, I so much want to like go look at what the other commentary says. It's like, it just seems so, what did they say? So just wanted to share that.
Fantastic.
That feeling.
So let's go now. Yes, Steve? Wait, use the mic.
Very quick question. So I'm noticing words like heed. Nobody uses words like heed anymore. So is that what we're trying to bring to the present day?
These are great questions. I saw the word heed. No one speaks like that. It gives me pause for thought. That's a great piece of things for the scholars working on this to hear. It may be purposeful or might not. Beautiful. Pass it over.
So if we're going into, a couple of comments on word choice, you could say sauntered. If you want to...
What verse are you on?
The very first line, number
Okay,
one.
verse
Out
1.
and about. I know that you want to keep the comparison with the Hebrew, the two words used, but if for contemporary English, you might say sauntered, because to me, I get a sense of I can't say.
Okay,
That doesn't come
so I
across.
would take your comment and say the use of out and about feels to me like it's missing a sense of sauntered or something like that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay.
Two comments. One is in line 1, or it says the Leah, and then down in line 7 where it says Yisrael, and it has the apostrophes. I've never seen them that way before. It makes it a little harder to read, I think, to contemporary. And
Beautiful. Is this a comment on the same thing? Pass the mic, and then we'll come back. We'll come back.
okay, fair enough.
Same thing as the writing of Leia's name. I've never seen it that way. It's hard to read. I think when we read Leia, we read it in the Leah, or however it is much easier to read. I was like, what is that?
So great. Do you want to say something?
Exactly,
Here.
Kathy.
So it's interesting because I first come with a Hebrew perspective, right? And then I look at the English. But actually, I noticed that all the names in the English are spelled like the Hebrew. And the best example, I think, is Yaakov versus Jacob. And then all the other names, I think it's written like this from the intention of keeping the Hebrew names as they are versus sort of translating the Hebrew into English, which is like what we're used to do when we read the text in English.
Just a comment back on that. But Yaakov, we see that, we understand that.
Right.
I've never seen Leia that way. That's where I'm confused.
Is this on the same thing?
It's the same section, not.
Okay, so let's go. So we're noticing that they're changing the spellings. Some of it might be more scholarly, or some of it might be to connect to the Hebrew. Interesting questions. We'll continue on. Go ahead, Mark.
The feeling of the whole section, the whole piece, strikes me as two things: as more stark and almost a revision back to an earlier version of this than what we're used to.
So if I can, tell me if these words express what you're saying. It feels like an older translation, at least with these words, than newer. So interesting. When each interpretation is pushing in directions. Is the intent to push it back, or is the intent to get closer to what was and say, we made a mistake in changing it? Because when I say to kids, Abram, they don't know what I'm talking about. When I say Avram, sometimes, because it sounds like Avraham, or Abram, Abraham. So we lose some of that. We'll figure it out. Okay, one and then two.
Mine's just about the first line and the verb, out and about went Dina. One immediate thought I had, when I first saw out and about, it seemed a lot more like Alice in Wonderland or Pollyanna, skipping around. So one thing I thought was like Dina left and loitered, something that was like this active leaving and kind of being around somewhere she wasn't. And I was just thinking about how we can, if we're allowed to like play, with the order, not just thinking of synonyms for what's already there. The second thought I had, or question I had, maybe for Rabbi Lana, is the history of the verb, because it says that the verb in Hebrew is chosen because of its connotations. And I'm curious about the evolution of that word in Hebrew, and also of who was translating and choosing the words at the beginning to see if we need to stick to that connotation. The going out and about, yatsa.
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of the words in biblical Hebrew are not words that we're using in modern Hebrew and vice versa. But this word, in Hebrew it says vatetse, which is the same form as what we're using in modern Hebrew today, and it literally means to go out. So I think the English edition that they are adding here is the out and about, which maybe brings you this connotation of what you were referring to. But vatetse Dina literally just means, and Dina left from her home and went.
So I guess
it is she's going.
So I guess one question, the actual question part then would be, are we trying to be loyal to the text, or are we trying to be? Do we need in this line to be loyal to the what's placed on the text by the male narrators of past?
I'm going to push us now because they. Go ahead, Michelle, let's pass this over. And then I'm going to push us to verse 2.
I was quite taken aback with out and about Wendina, because I've understood it that she was out and visiting other women in the land, because the connotation felt very, there was a judgment associated with out and about. It felt, because of patriarchy, it felt that there was an inference that she was doing something wrong. And if the original Hebrew that's the inference, of course, interpret it that way. Perhaps one wandered out was another way I thought might be a good word.
She brought her own Bible, and I had to say we're not supposed to. Okay, I want to push us to the second part of 2, where it says, saw her and took her, lay with her and debased her. How does that feel? What do you think about that language? Not how does it compare to what you've been taught before? How does it feel, and what does it convey? Okay, so now we'll go, come get.
Well, this comment ties in with what I wanted to say. Sometimes the obvious biblical or poetic rhythms and choice of words can be a good thing, because when you come in and sit down to read it, you get into the headspace of I'm reading Torah. I'm not reading the newspaper or a blog post. In the past, I've seen versions of either in a prayer book or something that have been so watered down that they have no feeling to them.
Okay, so with this gives you a feel like you get a feel out of this.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't like the old-fashioned sense,
but with this,
sometimes
stay with this.
I am in the headspace, I'm studying Torah, and that is a good thing.
Beautiful. Ilan? Beautiful.
So on this sentence, saw her, took her, lay with her, debased her, there is an immediacy. How can or maybe this already does, translation describe saw, took, lay, and then debased? It sounds very fast without consent. And debased is interpretation. The first things are action. I don't know.
Beautiful.
This is probably true to the Hebrew, I assume. But there's an underlying process.
You got to use the mic.
There's an underlying process that the Hebrew may not express well.
So let's read the Hebrew for a minute, because I think it really does justice to what you're saying. It's verse 2. It's on page 2. Verse 2, page 2. Vayare ota, saw her, Shchem ben Chamor HaChivi, the name of the person, Nasi haaretz, description to what he is, and then we have 3 verbs that are in order, one after the other. Vayikach ota, Vayishkav ota, Vaya'aneh. Took her, lay with her, and the translation of it debased her.
So I'm writing, so as far as taking notes, the language of took, lay, and debased was very purposeful, but what felt uncomfortable to you?
There's an immediacy, because remember, Dina went out to see the daughters of the land. And then Shem saw her, took her, lay with her, and debased her. There was an immediacy in that. She went out for ostensibly a different purpose. He saw her, he took her, he lay with her, he debased her, just without her consent.
Just that's one thing between the Hebrew and the English. So in the Hebrew, the first verb is saw her, then there is a pause, a description of who the man was, and then the three actions one after the other. Took her, lay with her, debased her. Whether in the English here, it's four actions one after the other. It first gives us the name of the person and who he was, and then saw her, took her, lay with her, debased her.
Okay, can we for a second turn to page 8, please?
Wait, could I just say one thing about that part? Just because everyone is saying it's kind of boom, 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 and I just think it's important to see it's not boom, boom, boom. They're coupled. It's saw her and took her, lay with her and debased her. And I think in Hebrew, it sounds like, and so there's a choice here in this translation between using an and using a comma. And I think it really has an impact. And it seems in the Hebrew, each one is v. So it could be and. It could be comma, comma, comma. It could be, I think we could kind of decide where the commas and the ands go and what the point is, because otherwise he saw her and took her as if by seeing her he had the power to take her, and then by laying with her he debased her.
Thank you. So take a look on, beautiful comment, page 8. And if you go under the number 2 on page 8, there's a dot, and then it says debased her. So the next paragraph under the number 2 on page 8. Everybody there? Page 2, you got Shechem, debased her. So the commentary on debased her, again, I'm going to read it. Scholars disagree about whether or not Shechem raped Dinah. The word inna, did I say that right? Can mean to, quote, to oppress, or to humiliate, or to do violence. Dolansky and Cohn argue that, quote, what happens to Dinah certainly should not be understood as an act of rape in the modern sense of the word. Rather, the term demonstrates in this passage, as elsewhere, a downward movement in the social sense, meaning to debase or to humiliate. Freimer-Kensky also argues against reading this verb as, quote, rape, noting that the essential moral wrong for the narrator was sexual intercourse with an unmarried daughter. Quote, the story focuses on the illicit aspects of Shechem's actions. He degrades her. Inna, degrade, is a key word in the sacred history of Israel and in the story of Sarah and Hagar. It usually has nothing to do with sex and means to treat people without regard to the proper treatment that their status requires, end quote. In the biblical context, the issue of Dinah's consent or the lack thereof is moot. The story is told from the viewpoint of the family and society from which Dinah went out. From their perspective, an unmarried girl's consent does not make sex a permissible act. She has, after all, no right of consent. It is noteworthy that the same verb appears in the Exodus narrative, describing the Egyptians' degrading treatment of the Israelites they enslaved. I want to remind everybody, of the 4 editors working on this, the prime editor of the commentary is Elsie Stern, who up till recently was the head of the Reconstructionist Rabbinic College, and Rabbi Janet Martyr, as well as Shelley Martyr, and I don't know Dr. Daniel Fisher-Livni as well. But these are people well steeped in modern feminist critique of Torah. And notice how they're articulating what this word means and doesn't mean. How it doesn't mean rape in the modern sense. That's what they're saying. Okay. Might have to microphone this around. Thank you.
Well, stop me if this is commentary, but if it doesn't mean rape, for humiliation, you could kill the entire group of people. So the humiliation was really a bad thing. I mean, more than, it's not embarrassed, it's way beyond.
It so enraged the brothers that they did what they did. So it's not minimizing the significance of it, it seems, according to this. It's just saying it's not this, it's this.
The commentary that you just read says it usually has nothing to do with sex. The translation says lay with her. How can that not be sex?
So
And the reason that this is important, because this one sentence enrages the sons, and that is why they murder everyone. So how this one sentence is interpreted is key to the entire narrative.
So great. So what I'm hearing from your comment is the commentary doesn't make clear enough to me why it's not about sex. Okay. Go ahead, Michelle.
For me, when I first look at it, I always think instead of debased, which is a very old-fashioned word, but I understand more the context of why it's used, violated would be a more modern word. And it doesn't mean it's violent, it just means violated something sacred.
I want to jump to the commentary on page 8, number 5. It's on verse 5, so page 8. Just to remind you what the Hebrew is. Now Yaakov heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah. Defiled. So let's look at the commentary on the word defiled.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing it. The verb timeh appears most often in texts describing ancient Israelite laws of ritual purity. Throughout Leviticus, it refers to desecrating a holy place or rendering a person or object ritually impure. Here, the defiled daughter is implicitly likened to a sacred object that has been desecrated. As Sarna writes, even more terrible than the offense against the person and dignity of the girl and the assault upon the honor of the family is the pollution of the moral environment. The entire community becomes infected by such wanton deeds.
Okay, so now we're going to have we're going to feel some frustration in a minute. Don't take it out on the text or on the responses, because I'm going to point out a couple of things from the commentary, and then we're going to have to process all this, okay? They recognize that this is just our experience here. So I'm going to point out some things, and then we're going to go through a whole series of questions, okay? I could study this and talk about this for hours on end, not what we're being asked. So look on page 8. No, excuse me, page 8, number 4. So the top, just above the paragraph we read, on the top of page 8, it says, verse 4, take this girl from me. The commentary. The verb lakach, used in verse 1 in an aggressive sense, is here used in a different sense. In biblical Hebrew, lakach can mean to marry, take in marriage. For similar usage, look in verses 9, 16, 21. So let's turn to page 9 and look at let's look at verse 25. On the right-hand column, page 9, the right-hand column. Just to give you what the Hebrew was, it was, and this is what happened, that Dinah's brothers Shimon and Levi took each of them his sword and fell unopposed on the unsuspecting city and slew every male. Took each of them his sword. The present translation of V'yikchu ish charbo, literally took each man his sword, emphasizes the verb took, which is prominent at the beginning of the chapter, verses 2 and 4, and also makes significant appearance in verse 26, took Dinah out of Shechem's house. Thus the brothers took their swords to avenge the violence of Shechem, who took Dinah, verse 2. Go down a little more to that dot between 26 and 30, the second to last paragraph. Everybody see that dot? Took Dinah and went out. The English is, what verse did we say? 26. The English is, as for Hamor and his son Shechem, they slew them with the devouring mouth of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. So there it says, took Dinah and went out. Here we find the same verbs that appear at the beginning of the story, verses 1 and 2. Yatzah and lakach, go out and take, but in reverse order. Some translate yatzah here as they left. The present translation preserves the same wording as in verse 1. Yeah.
So first of all, to minimize the frustration a little bit, you get to take this home together with the commentaries, and you also going to be requested to fill up a digital form after this session, and there will be room there to give more sort of in-detailed comments about various verses that we don't have necessarily time to go over right now, because we also want to be respectful of the time commitment. So this is all coming. We want to have a more macro sort of perspective right now. So when we started, we asked you to circle or to underline things that sort of came up for you. So I want to ask, generally speaking, as you look at this entire chapter, what struck you most about the translation as a whole? And what kind of things that you noticed? We took a few examples now together, going from separate verses, but now you can say whatever it is that you're feeling that struck you about the translation as a whole as we were reading this chapter. And Donna will take notes for us. Who wants to go first?
As a whole, no one writes or talks this way, which makes it very difficult to read, even to read it and understand it, just because it's such uncommon ways of saying things for us.
So just as a follow-up, Steve, hold on a second. No, Steve, don't give it away yet. Beautiful. And is it about this specific translation, or this is how you normally feel when you read Torah in English from different translations?
I can't recollect how I normally see it, but in this case, in reading this translation, it doesn't make it easy for the reader.
Okay.
How many people feel similarly to Steve that the translation made it harder to read? I'm seeing 1, 2, 3 hands. How many felt it made it easier? How many? I'm going to get there. 1, 2, 3-ish. How many say it worked? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Continuing on.
And of course, it doesn't mean anything about anybody. This is just a, yeah.
But if you voted one way, you're
Thank you. Ilan, go ahead.
So I'm wondering between the ways that the sons reacted and the way that the people of Shem reacted, there can be a bit more contrast in the English, in the sense that the sons reacted with strategy and deceit. The people of Shem didn't hear any of that and interpreted it rationally, and those were the words that they used. But in order to think through that, I had to look through the commentary and consider that there were two different ways of thinking going on here.
Okay. To Jill, Were you going to say, okay, hang on one second. So what I'm hearing and what you're saying is the commentary helped, the translation didn't clarify, but the commentary helped clarify for me some thinking on something. Go ahead.
So to add on to what I said before, where there's the poetry gets me into a headspace to study. If you were to take this and change it completely into contemporary English, would it be harsh, especially given the nature of the text? How would that affect my being able to analyze it? When something is written archaically, I set it in the past, and then I look at it in the past, which is a different analysis than a newspaper article of something that happened. So that doesn't have an action item, it's just it's a comment.
I find it a really, in general, a really good, solid translation from the standpoint of, you know, the original is, you have to really work hard to understand it, and it makes Torah study a little laborious because you have to sit there and well, what did they really mean? And I think, you know, as we were reading this, I was looking at it and saying, okay, would my adult children understand this without help? Would a high schooler understand this without help? Because the topic here is commentary for the 21st century. So while us older adults are reading it, this really is intended for the younger generations. And so I think, you know, we need to put an eye on looking at these translations from that standpoint of, would high schoolers and younger understand what's going on here? And I think, with the exception of maybe a couple of words, they would. You know, I find the out and about a little bit too sing-song, and what was the other thing we were talking about?
Don't make sense from the outside. So I like taking that ownership of it. The one thing, like I said before, with the ands and the commas, I think there are a lot of cause and effects implied here and connections made, which I would just want to go back to the actual text and just see why, or question why those connections were made and cause and effect, and if those should be left to the reader as opposed to spelled out so clearly. I think the things that don't sound like they flow as well might be, like I just saw in that commentary we just looked at, like mouth of the sword. That was one thing that spoke out to me as like, okay, that doesn't really sound, visually it doesn't really work, but I saw that it's a literal translation of an idiom. So, but it would sound weird, I mean, it would be weird, I think, to change it if it's an actual literal translation. So maybe idioms could either be in italic or quoted in quotes to show that we're keeping some things literal, even though it needs to be explained a little better, and we would choose something else another time. And then I also wanted to say one other thing that I think they did well is, and the thing about kind of beating the dead horse, it takes me back to what we talk about in the Passover Seder, and it really, I think, triggers discussion for young and old people alike about like when we ask ourselves if the same thought is conveyed 3 different ways, what are those differences?
Beautiful. Let me add 2 more questions as we go along. First of all, what were positive aspects of this translation for you? And what were the most struggling pieces of this translation for you?
I'll start. Overall, I liked it. The few words that we spoke about already. What I like is that because we are meant to question and we are meant to pick things apart. So if it's all laid out so like, this is it, then there's nothing to debate. There's nothing, well, is it? Did he debase her? Did he rape her or did he not rape her? We still need that question so that we can talk about it and also look at the words and the literal meaning of the Hebrew and change into the English. I think in the commentary, it took away from that. It totally said, well, that's not what it meant. Well, when I read it that she was raped when I'm reading before the commentary. So maybe a little less, well, this is what it is in the commentary, and maybe it was there and I just didn't follow it, so.
Yeah.
I just kind of want to add to what Kathy is saying. I had trouble with that too. Is this still titled The Rape of Dinah? No, because there's no title on here, and so that was one point. But if it's not rape, then when we went over that other stanza that talked about defiled, that was clearly rape. And then it was somebody had said something about, why would the brothers want to kill everyone if it wasn't for revenge for a rape? I mean, for humiliation, everybody goes through humiliation, depends on what level. So maybe, as Kathy said, it's so we do discuss and debate it, but it's saying 2 different things even in the commentary.
I just wanted to comment that without the commentary, and if the intent is to put all of the understanding in the translation, this would be much more difficult for me. So I'm hoping the intent is not to do away with the commentary.
It's all going to be commentary, yeah.
I mean, I've read Torah where it's just without the commentary and just the translation, and I might as well be reading the Greek translation.
But we should also be mindful that every translation is an interpretation. Yeah, even if there's no section of commentaries. Every single time we translate something, we interpret it whether we want to do it or not.
I really like the fact that there are nuances, that it gives the opportunity to interpret. And it seems to be threaded with that, and more so than the literal translation I've read. I've already said some words that I would change, but overall, I do like it. For me, it made the story come alive.
So if you would go out of here and you go home and
It's a new question?
But it's a follow-up. It will help you. But 1 second. If you will go home and you'll meet someone and you will want to share about this translation, which words will you describe in order to say something about this translation? If you can think of 3 or 4 words and tell us why.
What 3 or 4 words would you use to describe this commentary? Again, we're pushing through a whole series of questions.
Right.
So we have to help the CCAR.
What was the previous question? Because that was the one.
What you liked about this translation and what challenged you about it.
Well, most of us read novels from time to time, and all the novels have a certain style and language and rhythm that the author chose, the author's voice. And if you go from book to book to book, which I've done recently, just jumping wildly, each of them are a different style, and yet I can follow it. And it's not the way I talk, necessarily. So, and I don't know why I'm supporting the past so much, because I'm so interested in modernization, but I had no trouble with this. The awkwardness, yeah, there's some things that are awkward, like the point of the sword. What was the mouth of the sword? What was the point? You know, they stuck it. You know, I got it. I can tell you what happened. I could give you a description of the straight narrative. It was not a problem for me.
So you're saying you could follow along easily?
I could follow along.
Others, three words.
Does in progress count? I can talk to you afterwards or in my other comments if you don't want me to derail. I just wanted to respond to the one comment about rape, if it was okay. I mean, it would be short, but I also know that it's, yeah.
They have a request of us.
Right.
That's I would love to have that conversation, but later.
But I mean, about their commentary and about the question about it. Like, I think the commentary is good as is, and but it sounds like from the comments we've received here that it needs further commentary, because I understood what it meant, and that, like, right now, there, for instance, there's, you know, talks about how, like, virginity is a social construct, that virginity doesn't mean what it used to mean. And so to me, when I read this with the commentary, I see that her virginity or her purity was taken, and I think that can be couched in the context of that time. And I like the connection to the sacred objects, because that's obviously what she is. I think, you know, consent is explicitly said here in terms of the sons and the family of men, but never about, we don't know one way or another. We have no reaction of her. So I think, you know, I'm listening to the new translation of the Iliad right now, and she talks about how there are allusions to so many other stories, but that's not the point. We are getting one narrative, which is the point of this portion, and what actually happened between them and how they actually interacted with each other. That's not the point here. And so we have to figure out, I think, how to convey that it may have been rape, it may not have been rape, but what's the actual point? And I think it was the removal of her purity from the perspective of the brothers and the father.
Thank you.
Trying to be future forward. Trying.
Yeah. Yeah. Robin?
What kind of a father was Yaakov? He couldn't control his daughter, and he certainly didn't control his sons. So what kind of a leader and person of the household was he?
Other words about the translation. Thank you. And then we will wrap up.
It might be a repeat of what I said before, but I wrote updated. I like that it kept to the original Hebrew, and Donna said it much better than I, but understandable to future generations. Future forward is, I think that was beautiful. I'm going to steal it.
I'm just looking at the commentary on page 10 about the word whore. And I'm just wondering if that is the right word in this translation. Because that does not sound like from our discussion what actually happened.
Three words? Well, four? No. 3 words to describe this commentary for you. This translation. If no, just pass it.
As long as I have the commentary, I'm fine with it.
Difficult, inquisitive, and exploration.
So you will be, first of all, thank you. Thank you. We know it's a very challenging task, what we ask you to do. And we all want to say so many different things. So we really appreciate the effort of sort of going with us on this journey, which is stimulating to do other things at the same time. As I said earlier, we will send you a questionnaire, digital form, that the CCR asks all the participants to answer. And there will be room there to say more things that you wanted to say and you didn't say. And I just want to say 2 things. Donna, it's not for writing, it's for us as a community. First is that, as I said earlier, every single translation is an interpretation, and every single one of us is an interpreter. So the fact that somebody else wrote commentaries that we are reading, it's great for us to understand, but it doesn't mean that there's an exclamation mark at the end, because every single one of us come with an interpretation that can also be written in a book. And the fact that it's haven't yet doesn't mean that it's less good than somebody else's. So just to keep in mind. And lastly, there's a beautiful project that I'm happy to email the link for those who are interested, because clearly, specifically in this chapter, the pain is the fact that Dina is silent. And we can interpret until whenever, but we really don't know because her voice is not sound, which of course has been the trigger for thousands of years and even maybe more so right now. There's an amazing project done by 2 female rabbis that is called Torah, which is rewriting of the entire Bible in a feminine gendered form, which is absolutely fascinating. No, this is a commentary made by women. I'm talking about taking the Hebrew text, which in Hebrew is a gender language, so it's a big deal in terms of the feminine, masculine, how it's all written. And we sort of look into it as the narrator is a male. So what they did is they took the Hebrew text and they rewrote the Hebrew text in a feminine gendered wordings, which is fascinating to look at and to read from this perspective. So you can find it online, and if you'll email me, I'll happy to email back. It's called Torah. Yeah. That's for our general education, not related to what we're doing. Maybe, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So here's what you can do. Just some clarification. Number 1 is you can take these home. They can't be photographed or shared. They can't be uploaded. They are, to do so, could derail certain things. Okay, it's being shared with us. That's number 1. Number 2 is Rabbi Lana, probably today or tomorrow, one of us today will email you the online questionnaire. They ask you fill it out within 3 days. If you wait 5 days, you've forgotten the experience. They're trying to get immediacy. They take it very, very seriously. Thank you. This was just so much fun. And I love that they picked this story. I will tell you just one thing from my own experience. As I'm fascinated with words since I watched The Electric Company back as a kid, and they dealt stuff with words, and I love the flavor of it, and the poetry of the translation excites me. And this experience excites me, and thank you all for the frustration of not being able to go through. We're going to reset this place up for those who can. Yes, sir.
Just an aside question. In terms of language, are there puns in Hebrew?
Are there what?
Puns.
It's clearly in English.
Yes, there are puns. They're play on words. There are lots of that, and there's one in here, I don't remember where it is, you can read through the commentary. But yes, and they're going to play with it a lot. And with that, thank you very much. Thank you for those who streamed with us.
And thank you to Donna for being our note taker.
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. And there are more bagels.
And goodbye.